Karen reported me to the police, saying I had a dead body in the trunk. It was just a Halloween costume. Karen freaked out when she saw something strange in the trunk of my car, and, without thinking twice, called the police shouting that I had a dead body in there. When the officers arrived, they surrounded my car as if I were a dangerous fugitive. Halloween has always been my favorite time of year. There's nothing better than seeing adults and children dressing up as monsters, zombies, and demonic clowns while filling their veins with sugar. Like every year, I had bought some decorations to get my house in the mood: hanging skeletons, fake cobwebs, and, of course, a good old terrifying costume for the party I was going to. This time, my choice was a realistic bloody body costume. It was basically a rubber body bag, the well-made kind, with crooked limbs and an expression of frozen agony on its face. A masterpiece of terror. But I had no idea that this choice would turn me, for a few hours, into the most wanted criminal in the neighborhood. The mistake started on the way back from the store. As I was in a hurry, I unceremoniously threw the costume in the trunk and drove straight home. The plan was to put everything away and only pick up the costume the next day. But, as anyone who has ever been too lazy to unload shopping from the car can attest, I simply forgot. And so, my poor costume spent the whole night there, folded up in the trunk anyway. The next day, I woke up early, had my coffee quietly, and decided to go out to do some errands. Nothing out of the ordinary. A trip to the pharmacy, a trip to the market, grown-up things that nobody likes to do. Little did I know that, as I drove quietly through the neighborhood, someone was already about to call in the law against me, because she saw. She always does. The woman who turned other people's lives into a living hell of rules and regulations. The unofficial boss of the neighborhood. The queen of senseless denunciations. I don't know exactly how she noticed. Maybe she was spying through the window. Maybe she was on the street and saw when I opened the trunk to put something away. The fact is, she somehow caught a piece of the badly folded costume and did the only thing any good, extremely paranoid citizen would do. She called the police saying that I was carrying a dead body in the trunk. Yes, you read that right. While I was quietly picking up a packet of coffee at the market, she was already at home, phone in hand, putting on her best anguished victim tone to report a brutal and brazen murder happening in the neighborhood. "Officer, there's a man with a bloody body in the trunk of his car. He's acting normal, but I know what I saw. You need to come now." And then the most surreal scene of my life began. Because when I got back to the market parking lot, I saw something strange. 2 police cars, standing behind my car. And the policemen? Well, they were already waiting for me. The first thing that crossed my mind was, what the hell have I done? The second was, who was the bastard who did something and blamed it on me? The third was, oh no, it had to be that woman. I still didn't know what she had done, but my instinct told me that somehow she was the source of this circus. One of the policemen approached, his hand already resting on the holster of his gun, as if he were about to arrest a dangerous serial killer. What about me? Well, I was standing there, holding a bag of coffee and trying to understand why the hell I was about to be treated like a murderer. If someone had told me that I would start the day buying coffee and end up surrounded by police officers in the middle of the parking lot, I would have laughed in their face. But there I was, holding a bag of coffee, looking at 2 police cars blocking my exit, while 3 officers stared at me as if I had just escaped from Alcatraz. The only thing stopping me from completely panicking was the simple fact that I had no idea what was going on. "Sir, we need you to accompany us to your vehicle." The tone was firm, but not aggressive. It was the kind of approach that police officers use when they still don't know if you're a criminal or just an unlucky idiot. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, trying not to sound like someone who actually had a body in the trunk. The officer glanced quickly at his colleagues before answering. "We received a report of suspicious activity involving your vehicle. Just a routine check." Suspicious activity? I looked at my car, a dull old sedan, parked in the parking lot like any other. There was nothing about it that could arouse suspicion, but then I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. Across the street, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed and a triumphant smile on her face, was she, the queen of gossip, the champion of senseless accusations, the woman who, I was already sure, was responsible for all this nonsense. She was reveling in it. It was as if she had just solved a major crime, as if she had unmasked a serial killer with her incredible insight. Her posture screamed, "I saved this neighborhood from this monster." And it was at that moment that I realized. I knew exactly what had happened. The bloody body in the trunk, the Halloween costume, the most realistic piece of horror I'd ever bought, and which, through an oversight, had been forgotten in there. Only, from the point of view of a nosy neighbor, what she saw was completely different. In her mind, I was a cold, calculating killer who had simply decided to drive around town carrying a bloodied victim in his car. Oh, how I wish I could see her face when the truth came out. But first, I needed to get out of this situation. "Sir, can you open the trunk for us?" There was the question I knew would come. "Of course," I replied, shrugging. The only thing that kept me from laughing was the fact that these guys were actually taking this seriously. They thought they were about to find a dead body. And the gossipy neighbor? Oh, she was filming everything with her cell phone, ready to post it on the neighborhood group, saying that she always suspected me. The woman must have been feeling an ecstasy that not even Belgian chocolate can provide. I took a deep breath, grabbed my keys, and walked to the car, feeling the policeman's eyes burning into me. With a click, I unlocked the trunk and lifted the lid. The silence that followed was a masterpiece. The policeman stared at the costume thrown in there, the fake body bag, covered in scenographic blood, folded in any way as if it were a real body dumped. At a glance, one could understand the mistake, but looking closely, it was obvious that it was a piece of rubber and fabric. The first policeman blinked in disbelief. The second let out a tired sigh. The third, well, he started laughing. "My God in heaven," muttered the one who seemed to be the most experienced in the group. The policeman leading the approach rubbed his face, clearly fighting the urge to throw down his badge and change professions. "This is," he began, trying to find words. "A Halloween costume," I added. There was a moment of pure awkward silence as everyone processed the unbelievable amount of time wasted on that complaint. The second policeman looked at the first looked at the second, and then, slowly, they all turned their heads to the woman across the street. The look on their faces was something else. It wasn't anger, it wasn't frustration. It was the kind of look a teacher gives a student who has asked a question so absurd that it's not even worth answering. The woman realized she was the center of attention, but instead of admitting she'd made a fool of herself, she doubled down. But I saw blood," she exclaimed, raising her cell phone as if that proved something. The laughing policeman lost his composure for good and let out a short laugh. "Ma'am, that's paint." Her victorious smile evaporated faster than ice in the desert. "But it could have been real. I did the right thing," she insisted. The policeman, who seemed to be the leader, crossed his arms impatiently. "So you didn't check before calling 911? The woman began to stutter. It was a beautiful sight to see. She had been absolutely certain that she was going to come out as the heroine of the story. But now everyone knew that she was just an idle gossip who loved to stick her nose in where it didn't belong. The policeman took a deep breath and looked at me. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir." I shrugged, smiling. "No problem. I mean, now I'm going to have to think twice before buying too many realistic costumes." This drew another laugh from the policeman, who had already lost any trace of seriousness. But the best was yet to come. The policeman leading the operation turned to the woman and, in an unfriendly tone, said, "Ma'am, we can call you in for a statement about wasting police resources if you like." Her face. The gossip queen turned pale, and, for the first time in her entire existence, she kept her mouth shut. I, on the other hand, made a point of giving her one last amused look before getting into the car. Happy Halloween. And I drove off, leaving her there, processing the monumental shame that had just befallen her. If the story had ended with the embarrassed woman in the market parking lot, it would have been perfect. But life, my friends, is generous when it comes to other people's misfortune. After the public humiliation she suffered in front of the police, me and the onlookers who stopped to watch the circus, I thought she would finally leave me alone. Maybe she'd come into her own for a while. Stop trying to control everything and get on with her life without meddling in other people's affairs. Sweet illusion. If there's one thing nosy people hate more than being wrong, it's everyone knowing they're wrong. And the woman knew that, from that moment on, the whole neighborhood would be talking about the story of the crazy woman who called the police about a Halloween costume. So, what did she do? She tried to turn the tables at all costs. The next day, I was woken up by my cell phone vibrating more than an unbalanced washing machine. Messages from neighbors, notifications of appointments, prints coming in from all sides. She had taken the war to Facebook, and of course her narrative was completely different. In her version of the story, she wasn't the nosy neighbor who almost got me arrested for nothing. She was the brave guardian of the community, the only person willing to act in the face of a possible threat. Her post began like this: "Yesterday, a very worrying incident happened in our neighborhood. As a responsible citizen, I did what anyone would do when they see something suspicious. I called the authorities, but instead of support, I was ridiculed for simply worrying about the safety of our neighborhood." She went on to say that the police were negligent, that they didn't even bother to investigate properly, that today it may have been a fantasy, but what if tomorrow it's real? The icing on the cake was the ending. I just wanted to keep everyone safe. I feel attacked for simply trying to protect our families. If that's wrong, then I don't know what's right anymore. And then the comments started. And my God, how nice it was to see that no one fell for it. First came the more polite ones. "Hey, but what about the part where you had an innocent guy surrounded by policemen in the middle of the market?" Then came the teenagers making fun of her face. "I'm going to dress up as a mummy for Halloween. I hope you don't report me to Egypt. There's a decorating fair next week. Someone hide the mannequins before she freaks out again." She hadn't expected this reaction. The woman was used to dictating rules in the neighborhood without anyone objecting, but now everyone was against her. And of course, like anyone without a shred of humility, instead of accepting her mistake and getting on with life, she doubled down. That same day, she created a parallel Facebook group called Neighbors Against Chaos. The group's description was a masterpiece of insanity. "This is a space for those who want to live in a safe and orderly community, where respect for rules and common sense prevail. If you believe we should protect our neighborhood from suspicious activity, join us." Suspicious activity. The woman was talking about my Halloween costume as if I were the leader of an international cartel. The funniest thing? Hardly anyone joined the group. I learned that, for the first few days, only she and two ladies who complain about the noise of lawnmowers on Sunday were inside. But the best part? The neighborhood created another group called Neighbors Against Karen, and this one, in less than a week, already had 3 times as many members as her group. In other words, for the first time, the woman felt what it was like to be the neighborhood's hated minority. And she hated it, but she hadn't given up yet. She had one last card, and she was going to play it spectacularly. If the story had ended with the creation of Facebook groups and the whole neighborhood making fun of the woman, it would have been a worthy ending. But as I said before, some people just don't know how to lose. After seeing that no one was buying her narrative and that her Neighbors Against Chaos group was emptier than a bakery on a diet, she did what anyone completely disconnected from reality would do. She called the HOA. Yes, the woman, who already had a history of sticking the HOA with everything, decided that this was her last hope. The plan? Convince the neighborhood association board that I was a risk to the community. She tried to use everything against me. She wanted the HOA to fine me, force me to take down all Halloween decorations, and, if possible, give me a formal warning for inappropriate behavior. The problem? She forgot one very important detail. The HOA had had enough of her. At the end of the week, the HOA called a special meeting to discuss the incident. The room was packed, not because people were worried about me, but because no one wanted to miss the show. I went prepared. I took the screenshots of her posts, the comments from the neighborhood, and, of course, the video of the cops laughing in the parking lot. The woman, on the other hand, arrived in high heels, an impeccable blazer, and a binder full of false evidence, as if she were going to present a murder case before the Supreme Court. She began her accusation with the greatest possible drama. This man has brought fear and insecurity to our community. The audience already started squirming to keep from laughing. He has mocked our values, shamed our neighborhood, and exposed a devoted neighbor to ridicule on social media. Dedicated neighbor. That's a good one. The president of the HOA, a gentleman in his 60s who had clearly lost patience with her, sighed. Okay, do you have any hard evidence that he broke any rules? The woman turned red. His Halloween costumes are offensive. That should be against the guidelines. The president raised an eyebrow. That's not in the rules. She widened her eyes. Then it should be. Someone in the audience coughed to disguise a laugh. He exposed me in a humiliating way on the internet. That's harassment. The president looked at me. Did you really post something offensive? I lifted up the prints and read them out loud. Happy Halloween. Two people at the back of the room couldn't hold back their laughter. The president pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly regretting his birth. You called the police because you thought he had a dead body in his car. But it was just a fantasy, right? She crossed her arms. But it could have been real. But it was not. The woman began to breathe heavily. She was realizing that her case was not going at all as she had planned. The president sighed again. Ma'am, if there's no rule broken, there's nothing we can do. But he's turning this neighborhood into a circus. This made the man lose patience. He looked around at the audience. Does anyone here feel threatened by him? Absolute silence. Does anyone here want Halloween costumes banned? More silence. And then someone in the background raised their hand. Actually, I think his decorations are the best on the street. And that's when the woman who tried to destroy me realized she'd lost. She opened and closed her mouth a few times, trying to formulate a response, but she had no more cards up her sleeve. She looked around and saw all the neighbors staring at her with that, I've had enough, haven't I? Look, her mouth trembled. Her pride was wounded. Her ego was crushed. And then, without saying another word, she got up and left the room, tapping her heels on the floor as if she wanted to pierce it. The neighbors waited a minute before bursting into laughter. The HOA president just shrugged and officially declared, well, case closed. I left the meeting a local hero. Over the next few days, everyone wanted to greet me, make jokes about Halloween. And one neighbor even gave me a sticker that said, Caution, transporting fake bodies since 2024. And Karen? Well, after that embarrassment, she practically disappeared from the social life of the neighborhood. She stopped trying to control others, stopped being the boss of the street, and became just another shadow with no morals in the neighborhood. And what about me? Well, I carried on living my life quietly. And on Halloween that year, I dressed up as a policeman, just to make sure no one called the police again. Don't forget to comment on what you thought of this video, and finally leave a like. See you, my friends.